So I'm sitting here with Dr. Pim van Lommel, one of the leading researchers on near-death experiences, and we're at the IANDS conference in Bellevue, Washington. Thank you for taking just a few moments to sit with me. The bulk of your research has been, I understand, on cardiac patients. Well, there's been a lot more than that, but cardiac patients in near-death experience.
You're right.
Can you say a little bit about hypoxia and NDEs and what you've discovered?
Well, the main thing is we did a prospective study in 344 survivors of cardiac arrest in 10 Dutch hospitals, and we found that there is no medical explanation like anoxia, lack of oxygen in the brain. People who have a cardiac arrest for 2 minutes or 8 minutes didn't matter at all. People who have been unconscious for 5 minutes or 3 weeks in coma didn't matter at all. So the severity of lack of oxygen in the brain didn't matter at all if people had an NDE or not. So we had 80% of patients who had an NDE and 82% of patients who did not report an NDE in our study. And there was no difference at all between all those patients with and without. Also, giving medication didn't matter at all. Fear of death, psychological explanation didn't matter at all. Religion, if they were atheists or Christian, didn't matter at all.
Didn't matter.
Pre-knowledge that you know that these experiences are possible didn't matter at all. So the conclusion was there is no scientific explanation why people have a near-death experience during cardiac arrest. But the challenge was for us to do patients with a cardiac arrest. We call it clinical death. So when your heart stops, you get unconscious.
Yes.
And there's no breathing, no circulation, no heart. And when you don't initiate CPR within 5 to 10 minutes, people will die because of irreversible damage to the brain. So it's the process, it's about the process of dying. And in those patients where the brain function has stopped, and we know from other studies that within 10 to 20 seconds, the EEG is flatlined. And the clinical findings are unconsciousness, no body reflexes, which is a function of the cortex, no brainstem reflexes, the gag reflex, the pupil reflex, widened pupils, corneal reflex, all are gone, no breathing at all. So the clinical findings and the measurements of the electrical activity of the cortex, everything is flatlined. And then at this moment, 80% of the people have an enhanced consciousness with emotions, with cognition, etc.
Let me pause and repeat that. You have strict criteria to determine they're dead, they are flatlined.
Yeah.
The oxygen, the brain is clearly starved of oxygen far beyond 20 or 30 seconds. There's no neurological activity in the brain at that point, and yet you say at that point they have expanded and enhanced consciousness.
Exactly.
And are able to report very sophisticated experiences.
Exactly. So they have memories, cognition, possibility of perception out and above the body at the moment that the brain doesn't function. We don't measure the EEG, but there have been other studies done in induced cardiac arrest. But we know there's never a CPR within 20 seconds. So all the patients that have been, we had 344 patients included, but there have been 4 prospective studies in cardiac arrest patients with NDE, 562 patients in total, and they all must have had a flatline EEG, and about between 10 and 20% of those patients had enhanced consciousness in near-death experience. While the majority of neuroscientists still believe the never-proven concept that consciousness is a product of the brain,
yes,
then unconscious experience should be impossible.
Should be impossible. It's impossible to have language or clear cognitive recall, and yet they come back with an enhanced memory which never fades over the years which progress afterwards.
Exactly.
You mentioned 10 to 20% of patients have these near-death experiences or these mystical moments. Now, even if only one patient has it, it raises the question of, does the brain produce the mind, or is the mind mediated through the brain? But 10 to 20% out of 500 plus cases, that's a significant number of cases.
It is.
What it means, of course, is some people, most people, will not have a near-death experience, but it's occurring statistically significant frequency enough to provide a good amount of material.
Yes, and the question then is the 82%, did they not have an experience,
Yes.
or did they don't remember it?
Do they not remember?
And that's the reason we did a longitudinal study as well, with taped interviews 2 years and 8 years after the cardiac arrest with all the survivors with an NDE, with a matched control group of patients who had the cardiac arrest without NDE. And we found that only patients with an death experience had a classical transformation, no fear of death anymore. So a strong belief in an afterlife, a new insight what is important in life, unconditional love and compassion towards yourself and towards others, and enhanced intuitive sensitivity. So statistically, only patients with an NDE had the transformation, which is the objective criteria for a subjective experience.
And you're referring to a shift in the existential foundation of their being, a totally realignment of their priorities, appreciation of life. It's beautiful that these fairly brief experiences, as deep as they are, they can be quite brief, result in a life change, enhancing their consciousness.
How is it possible that a cardiac arrest of 2 minutes gives a lifelong transformation?
Yes.
But it is also spiritual trauma, because they cannot share it with others.
Yes.
People don't believe it, the physician, nurses, family members don't believe you. So it is a long period of work. The first years is period of depression, loneliness, homesickness. So it takes years and years to accommodate and to accept your experience and then to integrate it into your new life inside.
Of course, they've moved from this level of consciousness to one so expansive and so loving, and then compressed back into this. It renders one homesick and feeling out of place in this world. And there's a period of depression and feeling lost until they're able to integrate this. No wonder it takes years
and years and years.
And years.
Exactly.
But now it's lovely. The research is greater than ever. The support from the International Association for Near-Death Studies and other organizations is out there. It's online. People can access that. Fantastic. Fascinating.
It is. Perhaps another thing to add is that they're far more spiritual.
Yes, but not necessarily religious.
And they have religious feelings.
Yes.
Religion is the Latin term for reconnect.
Yes.
Religion, reconnect. They feel more religious. But the church as institute is less important because they don't believe anymore.
Yes.
They know. And that's the difference.
That's quite a powerful difference.
Exactly.
My hope, of course, as a minister within the church, is that we in the faith communities can learn more about this, appreciate it, and it can renew and revitalize the sleeping faith and the old theological language with a contemporary understanding and an immediacy that this is indeed real, and millions upon millions of people experience it.
Exactly.
And we're all going to find out one day.
And these kind of experiences have been told in all times, all cultures and all religions.
Yes.
So what we call the mystical experience in the Middle Ages, like Joan of the Cross or Francis, etc.
Yes.
Mostly this kind of experience happened through near drowning or high fever, sometimes during prayer. But the content and the after effects were exactly the same as the near-death experiences now.
So, of course, each experience will be expressed according to the cultural relevancy, language, and contact of the person in history.
Exactly.
But if it is indeed true that we survive mortal death, then it must be a universal phenomenon,
It is.
an aspect of consciousness.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fascinating, and really appreciate all the research papers. Please Google Dr. Pim van Lommel and have a look at his work as well as all the other research on near-death experiences.